"Night Fox," the nurse said, and the SEAL Admiral lost command of the room. Admiral Aidan Vance didn't flinch. "I don't care about the extraction protocols," Aidan roared, his voice a gravel slide that usually silenced war rooms. "You left 3 men in the dirt. Give me one reason I shouldn't strip that trident off your chest right now." The room was a vacuum of terrified silence. Even the attending surgeons had frozen, scalpels hovering. Then a soft, calm voice drifted up from the IV stand behind him. "Check your pulse, Night Fox. You're spiking the patient's BP." Aidan stopped. He didn't turn. He didn't breathe. The air left the room, and for the first time in 20 years, the Admiral was the one shaking. The silence that followed was heavy, wet, and suffocating. Admiral Aidan Vance was a man sculpted from scar tissue and classified redactions. At 42, he commanded the Naval Special Warfare Development Group with a terrifying, cold efficiency. He was known for 2 things: absolute control and a temper that could level buildings if provoked by incompetence. The private recovery suite at Walter Reed was supposed to be his domain. He had cleared the floor to interrogate the survivor of a botched operation in Yemen, ignoring the protests of the medical staff. He was the predator in the room, until he wasn't. Slowly, painfully slowly, Aidan turned his head. The nurse was adjusting a drip regulator. She was small, obscured by standard-issue blue scrubs, a surgical mask, and a bouffant cap that hid her hair. She didn't look at him. Her gloved hands moved with a rhythmic, hypnotic precision. Tap, check, slide. The lieutenant, sensing a reprieve, exhaled shakily. "Admiral, Get out," Aidan whispered. The lieutenant blinked. "Sir?" "Everyone," Aidan said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears, hollow, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Clear the room. Now." The medical team hesitated. The lead surgeon stepped forward. "Admiral, this patient is critical. We cannot—" Aidan spun on his heel, his eyes wild, burning with a frantic intensity that scared the surgeon more than the shouting had. "I said get out! Leave the nurse! Everyone else out!" The authority in his tone was brittle, but it still held the weight of rank. The room scrambled. The lieutenant fled. The surgeons backed out, hands raised in surrender, the heavy magnetic doors sealing with a pneumatic hiss. The room fell into a hum, the rhythmic whoosh-click of the ventilator and the steady beep of the cardiac monitor. The nurse didn't look up. She finished adjusting the saline, then moved to the patient's other side to check the drainage tube. She worked with an economy of motion that Aidan knew. He knew the way she shifted her weight to the balls of her feet. He knew the specific, idiosyncratic way she tucked her thumb when she gripped a chart. 7 years, Aidan said. The words felt like broken glass in his throat. The nurse paused. She kept her back to him, her fingers lingering on the plastic tubing. "Turn around," he commanded. It was supposed to be an order, but it came out as a plea. She sighed, a soft, resigned sound that he had heard 1,000 times in humid tents and dusty safehouses. She turned. Her eyes, visible above the mask, were a startling, impossible amber. Aidan felt his knees unlock. He grabbed the edge of a rolling table to steady himself. "Zoe," he breathed. She reached up, unhooked the loops of the mask, and let it fall. The face was older, framed by faint lines of exhaustion, but it was her. The scar on her chin, the slight crook in her nose from a break in Damascus. "Hello, Aidan," she said quietly. He stared at her, his brain misfiring, trying to reconcile the corpse he had buried in his memory with the woman standing 3 feet away. "I have your dog tags," he said, the logic of it stupid and clumsy. "I have your tags in a box in my safe. I carried your casket." "Weighted sandbags," Zoe said. Her voice was flat, professional, as if she were delivering a diagnosis. Standard protocol for a burn notice extraction. Burn notice? Aiden took a step forward, anger beginning to mix with the shock. I was the team leader. I was there when the building fell. I dug through the rubble for 12 hours until they dragged me away. I know. Zoe's eyes shimmered, just for a second, before the walls went back up. I watched you from the drone feed. Aiden felt like he'd been punched in the gut. The memory of that day. Aleppo, the dust, the screaming, the crushing weight of failure slammed into him. He had mourned her. He had destroyed his marriage because he couldn't look at his wife without wishing she was Zoe. He had turned into the cold, ruthless commander he was today because the part of him that felt human had died under that concrete with her. Why? He asked. The single word carried the weight of 7 years of grief. Zoe checked the monitor again, a reflex to keep her hands busy. Because if you knew I was alive, you would have come for me. And if you came for me, they would have killed us both. Aiden closed the distance between them. The air crackled with a kinetic energy, the ghost of a touch they hadn't shared in nearly a decade. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, trembling. He needed to touch her to prove she wasn't a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation and caffeine. Who is they, Zoe? His voice dropped to a dangerous growl. Who made you disappear? Zoe looked at the door, then back at him. The fear in her eyes was real now. The same people who signed your promotion orders last week, Admiral. The revelation hung in the air, toxic and paralyzing. Aiden withdrew his hand, his military mind trying to latch onto the threat, to categorize it, to strategize. But his heart was still hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. That's impossible, Aiden said, though he knew in the dark corners of his profession nothing was impossible. Command cleared the site. Intelligence confirmed the kill. Intelligence orchestrated the kill, Zoe corrected, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. She moved around him, checking the door's viewport. The leak in Aleppo wasn't an accident, Aiden. It was a liquidation. My unit knew about the slush fund in the Black Sea accounts. We were liabilities. Aiden rubbed his face, the friction of his palm against his stubble grounding him. So you ran? You let me think you were dead? I didn't have a choice. Her composure cracked, just a hairline fracture. I woke up in a black site in Jordan. By the time I got out, the official report was filed. KIR. Closed casket. If I resurfaced, if I contacted you, they would have scrutinized you. You were rising fast. They would have used me to break you. She walked past him, grabbing a clipboard. She was retreating into the role of the nurse, the camouflage she had worn for years. I'm not leaving, Aiden said, blocking her path. You have to, Zoe hissed. You made a scene. The hallway is full of ears. If anyone looks into who I am, if they run my prints... Let them, Aiden snarled. I run this floor. You don't run them, Zoe snapped. You're an admiral, Aiden, not a god. There are cameras in the hallway. There are logs. You just cleared a room to talk to a random nurse. You think that won't get flagged? She was right. She was always right. That was what made her the best intel analyst he'd ever embedded with. She saw the angles he missed because he was too busy looking for the target. Meet me, he said. No. Zoe. He grabbed her wrist. It was warm. Alive. The contact sent a jolt through him that was almost painful. I am not losing you again. I will tear this hospital down, brick by brick. She looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his eyes. The resolve in her gaze softened, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. The boathouse? She whispered. 0200. Aidan let her go. The boathouse. It was an old drop site they had used in Virginia Beach years ago. A lifetime ago. "Go," she said, pulling her mask back up, "before you get us both killed." Aidan straightened his uniform. He pulled the mask of the Admiral back over his face, the stoic, unreadable mask that had served him so well. He turned and hit the door release. The hallway was quiet, but the tension was palpable. The lieutenant was leaning against the wall, pale. 2 MPs were standing guard. A cluster of doctors whispered near the nurses' station. When Aidan emerged, the conversation died instantly. He walked past them, his stride long and aggressive. He didn't look at the lieutenant. He didn't look at the doctors. "Sir," the lieutenant ventured. "Get the transport," Aidan barked, not breaking stride. "We're moving the asset to a secure facility at 0600. Until then, nobody enters that room without my direct authorization codes." He needed to buy her time. He needed to buy himself time to think. As he marched toward the elevators, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A secure line. He pulled it out. "Director Miller." Aidan stared at the screen. Miller had been his mentor. Miller had signed the papers on the Aleppo operation. Miller had handed him the folded flag at the memorial service for Zoe. "The same people who signed your promotion orders." Aidan didn't answer. He let the phone buzz against his palm like an angry hornet. He stepped into the elevator and watched the doors close, the metal reflection showing a man who looked composed on the outside, but whose world had just been set on fire. The boathouse was a rotting skeleton of timber and peeling paint on the edge of the Potomac, miles away from the prying eyes of the Beltway. The fog had rolled in thick and grey, dampening the sound of the city. Aidan arrived at 1:45. He swept the perimeter twice. Habit. Paranoia. He sat in the dark of his SUV, watching the tree line. His weapon was on the passenger seat, a Sig Sauer P226. He hadn't carried a personal sidearm off duty in years. Tonight, he felt naked without it. At 02:05, headlights cut through the fog. An old Honda Civic, dented and nondescript, crunched over the gravel. Aidan got out, his hand hovering near his waist. Zoe stepped out. She had changed out of her scrubs into jeans and a thick wool coat. She looked smaller out here in the open, away from the sterile lights of the hospital. She looked like a civilian. They stood 10 feet apart, the mist swirling between them. "I didn't think you'd come," Aidan said. "I almost didn't." Zoe crossed her arms, shivering against the damp cold. "You looked good, Aidan. The stars on the collar suit you." "Don't do that," he said roughly. "Don't make small talk." "It's all I have left," she shot back. "I don't have a life, Aidan. I have a cover identity. I have a fake social security number. I have a 1-bedroom apartment in Maryland that I can leave in 3 minutes flat. Small talk is the only thing that's safe." "You could have trusted me," Aidan said, the hurt surfacing again. "I would have protected you." "You couldn't even protect yourself," she said, her voice trembling. "Do you remember the briefing before Aleppo? The encrypted drive that went missing?" Aidan nodded. "We thought it was a clerical error." "It wasn't. It was Miller. He was selling the movement data to the insurgents." Aidan froze. "Miller? He's the director of naval intelligence, Zoe. He's the godfather to my niece." "He's a traitor," Zoe said. "I found the transfer logs. I decrypted them the night before the raid. I was going to bring them to you after the op. But then the building came down." She took a deep breath. "When I woke up in Jordan, the interrogator wasn't enemy combatant. It was CIA, a cleaner. He told me that everyone in my unit was dead, and if I wanted to stay alive, I had to be dead too." Aidan paced the gravel, his boots crunching loudly. It was too much. It was a conspiracy theory wrapped in a ghost story, but deep down, The pieces fit. The botched intel, the sudden ambush, the way Miller had rushed the investigation, sealing the files under national security. So you've been here? This whole time? I moved around, Chicago, Seattle. Then I heard Miller was pushing for the new drone initiative in D.C. I knew he was up to something. I came back to, I don't know. To watch? To find proof? You're a nurse, Aiden said, shaking his head. I was a medic before I was intel, remember? She smiled, a sad, fleeting thing. It's a good cover. Nobody looks at the nurse. We're furniture. Aiden looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the fatigue, the fear, but also the steel that had made him fall in love with her in the first place. Night Fox, he whispered. It was her call sign, the one he had given her because she could move through a war zone without snapping a twig. That name is dead, Aiden. No, he said, stepping closer. He reached out and cupped her face. Her skin was cold. She's not. She just woke up. Zoe leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. A single tear tracked through the dust on her cheek. For a moment, the 7 years vanished. They were just two soldiers in the dark, trying to keep each other warm. A twig snapped in the woods. Aiden moved instantly. He shoved Zoe behind him, drawing the SIG in one fluid motion, leveling it at the darkness. Get down, he commanded. Aiden, hush. Silence. Then, the distinct, metallic slide of a weapon racking. Admiral Vance, a voice called out from the trees. It was distorted, digital. Drop the weapon. You are compromising an ongoing investigation. Identify yourself, Aiden yelled, shielding Zoe with his body. We aren't here for you, Admiral, the voice said. Hand over the woman. She is property of the United States government. Aiden glanced back at Zoe. She was pale, her eyes wide with terror. She knew who this was. Over my dead body, Aiden growled. 3 red laser dots appeared on Aiden's chest. That can be arranged, the voice replied. Aiden looked at the car, then at the lasers. He had 0 cover. He was outgunned, but he had the Night Fox behind him. Zoe, he whispered, not moving his lips. On my mark. Flashbang in the glove box. You still keep one? She whispered back, a hint of disbelief in her voice. Old habits, he said. 3, 2, 1. The explosion wasn't a sound. It was a physical blow that shattered the night. The flashbang detonated inside the open glove box of the SUV just as Aiden kicked the door shut, amplifying the concussion outward. The world turned into a searing wall of white magnesium light and a deafening crump that flattened the tall grass for 20 yards. Move! Aiden roared, grabbing Zoe by the back of her coat. The laser dots on his chest vanished, washed out by the blinding flare. Screams erupted from the tree line, the primal, confused shouts of men whose night vision goggles had just flared out, effectively blinding them. Aiden didn't waste the second of chaos. He shoved Zoe into the driver's seat of his Tahoe, diving into the passenger side as rounds began to chew up the gravel where they had just been standing. The rear window shattered, showering the back seat in safety glass. Drive, Aiden shouted, returning fire blindly through his open window, the Sig Sauer bucking in his hand. Zoe didn't fumble. She slammed the transmission into drive and stomped the gas. The heavy SUV fishtailed, tires screaming against the loose stones before biting into the dirt. She spun the wheel hard, drifting the vehicle in a tight arc that sprayed mud and gravel toward the shooters. Head down! She yelled, ducking as a burst of automatic fire stitched a line across the hood. They roared out of the clearing, tearing through the overgrown access road. Zoe drove with a terrifying, cold focus, her hands relaxed on the wheel, despite the speedometer climbing past 80 on a road meant for tractors. They're pursuing, Aiden said, checking the side mirror. 2 sets of LED headlights, pierced the fog behind them, gaining fast. These weren't standard sedans, they were up-armored interceptors. Who are these guys, Zoe? CIA? SAD? Worse, Zoe said, her eyes flicking to the rear view. Private contractors. Miller outsources the wet work to a firm called Obsidian. No rules of engagement, no paper trail. Aiden cursed. Obsidian was a myth in the mess halls, a ghost army of ex-Tier 1 operators who had washed out for being too unstable. If Miller had them on payroll, this wasn't just a cleanup, it was a war. "Take the next right," Aiden commanded. "Old logging trail. It connects to Route 17. It's a dead end, Aiden. The bridge washed out 2 years ago. Trust me." Zoe hesitated for a fraction of a second, then wrenched the wheel. The SUV careened onto a narrow dirt track, branches whipping against the doors like angry lashes. The interceptors followed, their high beams flooding the cabin with blinding light. "We're going to die," Zoe stated flatly. "Not tonight," Aiden growled. He reached into the back, pulling out a heavy Pelican case he kept under the seat. "Hold it steady." "What are you doing?" Aiden popped the case. Inside wasn't a rifle, but a heavy-duty flare gun and a bundle of road flares. "Improvising. When we hit the washout, cut the lights." "Aiden, that's suicide! Do it!" The road ahead ended abruptly in a jagged lip of asphalt overlooking a dark ravine. Zoe didn't brake. She killed the headlights. The world went pitch black. "Now!" Aiden yelled. He rolled down his window and fired the flare gun backward, aiming not at the cars, but at the canopy of dry pines above the road. The magnesium slug hit the resin-soaked branches and exploded into a fireball. Simultaneously, Zoe slammed the brakes, throwing the SUV into a controlled slide just feet from the edge. The first interceptor, blinded by the sudden darkness and the explosion above, didn't react in time. It shot past them, flying off the edge of the washout, its headlights illuminating the empty air before it crashed into the ravine below. The second car skidded to a halt, tires smoking, trapped behind the wall of fire Aiden had ignited. Zoe breathed out, a shuddering gasp. The SUV idled in the dark, the orange glow of the burning trees reflecting in her wide eyes. "You're insane," she whispered. "I'm alive," Aiden corrected, holstering his weapon. His hands were shaking just a little. "And so are you. Now get us out of here before they call air support." The safe house was a hunting cabin in the Shenandoah Valley, bought under a shell corporation 3 years ago. It had no internet, no cell service, and lead-lined shutters. It was the only place Aiden felt he could think without Miller's algorithms listening in. Zoe sat at the rough-hewn wooden table, a first aid kit open in front of her. She was stitching a laceration on Aiden's forearm, glass from the window. She worked in silence, the nurse taking over, her movements efficient and gentle. Aiden watched her. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a cold, aching exhaustion. Seeing her like this, in the soft light of a kerosene lamp, made the last 7 years feel like a nightmare he had finally woken up from. "You have grey hair," she said softly, tying off the suture. "Occupational hazard," Aiden murmured. It started the week after the funeral. Zoe's hands paused. She didn't look up. "I came to the funeral, you know." Aiden stiffened. "What?" "I was in the back, wearing a wig and oversized sunglasses, like a bad spy movie cliché." She gave a dry, humorless laugh. "I saw you standing by the grave. You looked hollow. I almost ran to you then. I took 2 steps, but then I saw Miller put his hand on your shoulder. I saw him lean in and whisper something to you, and I saw the way you nodded. He told me I had to be strong for the unit," Aiden said, his voice thick. "He told me your sacrifice saved the mission." "He was securing his asset," Zoe said, finally meeting his eyes. The amber was hard, flinty. "He needed to make sure you were still his. If you had broken down, if you had started asking questions, you would have been a liability. Aidan pulled his arm back, rolling down his sleeve. Tell me about the property of US government comment, Zoe. The voice in the woods. That wasn't normal chatter. Zoe stood up and walked to the window, peering through the crack in the shutter. After I escaped the black site in Jordan, I didn't just run. I stole a hard drive. I thought it was financial records. It wasn't. She turned back to him, her silhouette framed by the darkness. Miller isn't just selling intel, Aidan. He's running a program called Lazarus. They take operators who are KIA, people with no family, or people whose deaths can be easily fabricated. They don't kill them. They recondition them. Aidan felt the room spin. Recondition? You mean brainwashing? Chemical augmentation, neuroprogramming. They turn them into ghosts. Assets that don't exist, that can be deployed for domestic assassinations, corporate espionage, things the SEALs would never touch. She hugged herself, shivering despite the fire in the hearth. They tried to put me in the processing queue. That's how I got the scar on my chin. I fought the orderly with a scalpel. Aidan stood up slowly. The horror of it was suffocating. He had sent men to their deaths. He had written the letters to their mothers. Had some of them been taken? That's why they want me back, Zoe whispered. I'm a control subject that got away, and I have the names, the list of every operator they've taken in the last 10 years. Where is the list, Zoe? She tapped her temple. Eidetic memory. It's all up here. That's why I can't write it down. That's why I can't upload it. If they catch me, they wipe me. If I die, the truth dies. Aidan walked over to her. The anger was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective resolve. He reached out, hesitating, then pulled her into his arms. She didn't resist. She collapsed against him, burying her face in his chest, her hands gripping the back of his shirt. I'm sorry, she sobbed, the tears finally breaking through. I'm so sorry I left you. Aidan buried his face in her hair, smelling the smoke and the faint, familiar scent of vanilla she always wore. You didn't leave me, he whispered. You survived. And now, we're going to burn their whole world down. He held her until the shaking stopped, but his mind was already racing, tactical maps overlaying the emotional ruin. Miller, the Pentagon, the lie he had lived for 7 years. We need to go on the offensive, Aidan said, pulling back to look at her. How? Zoe wiped her eyes. We're 2 people against the intelligence apparatus of the entire Western Hemisphere. No, Aidan said, a cold smile touching his lips, the smile that had earned him his rank. We're the Admiral of the Development Group and the Night Fox, and tomorrow morning I'm going to walk right through the front door of the Pentagon. The Pentagon was a fortress of limestone and bureaucracy, a place where silence was a weapon and careers died in fluorescent-lit corridors. Admiral Aidan Vance walked through the E-ring security checkpoint at 0700 hours. His uniform was immaculate. His ribbon rack was perfectly aligned. He had shaved the stubble and the exhaustion from his face, leaving only the stone mask of command. He moved with the predatory grace of a shark in a swimming pool. Junior officers pressed themselves against the walls to let him pass, sensing the dark energy radiating off him. He didn't go to his office. He went straight to the director's suite. Admiral Vance, the secretary stammered, standing up. Director Miller is in a briefing. He can't. Aidan didn't stop. He pushed open the heavy mahogany doors and stepped inside. The room was vast, dominated by a long conference table and a wall of screens displaying global troop movements. Director Miller sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 men in grey suits who didn't look like military. Miller was 60, with silver hair and the grandfatherly demeanour of a man who strangled puppies for sport. He looked up, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Aiden," Miller said, gesturing for the suits to leave. They gathered their files and walked out, eyeing Aiden with professional suspicion as they passed. "To what do I owe the pleasure? I heard you had a rough night at Walter Reed." Aiden walked to the other end of the table and sat down. He placed his cover on the table, aligning it perfectly with the edge. "It was a long night, sir," Aiden said, his voice level. "I'm worried about the leak in the Yemen operation. I think we have a mole." Miller leaned back, studying him. "A mole? That's a serious accusation, Aiden. Do you have proof?" "I'm working on it." Aiden locked eyes with him. "I ran into an old friend last night. Someone I thought was dead. The air in the room froze." Miller didn't blink. He didn't twitch. He was good. "Is that so?" Miller asked softly. "Grief does strange things to the mind, Aiden. Sometimes we see what we want to see." "This wasn't a hallucination, sir. This was visceral." Aiden leaned forward. "I think she has something that belongs to you." Miller's smile vanished. He tapped a pen against the table. "If this person, this ghost, has sensitive material, Aiden, it would be in your best interest to bring it in. For her safety. And yours." "I don't know where she is," Aiden lied. He kept his heart rate steady, knowing Miller probably had biometrics monitoring the room. "She ran. But if she contacts me, I need to know what the protocol is. Do I bring her in, or do I put her down?" It was the test, the ultimate test of loyalty. Miller stared at him for a long, agonizing minute. He was weighing Aiden's utility against the risk. Finally, Miller sighed, looking almost regretful. "If she's compromised, Aiden, if she's been turned by the enemy, you know the protocol. A burn notice is permanent. There are no resurrections." Aiden nodded slowly. "Understood, sir." He stood up and grabbed his hat. He had his answer. Miller wanted her dead, and he expected Aiden to be the executioner. "Oh, and Aiden," Miller called out as Aiden reached the door. Aiden turned. Miller pointed to the large screen on the wall. It flickered, changing from a map of Yemen to a live security feed. It was the interior of a hospital room, the recovery suite at Walter Reed. The bed was empty, the machines were overturned, and on the floor, in a pool of blood, lay the lieutenant, the survivor Aiden had interrogated yesterday. "The survivor from Yemen died an hour ago," Miller said, his voice cold. "Cardiac arrest. Very sudden. It's a shame. He was the only witness to whatever happened on that beach." Aiden stared at the screen. They had killed the kid. Just to clean the board. Just to send a message. "A tragedy," Aiden said, his knuckles white on his hat. "Indeed," Miller said. "Keep your house in order, Admiral. I'd hate for you to be the next tragedy." Aiden walked out of the office. He kept his pace steady until he reached the elevator. Once the doors closed, he slumped against the wall, exhaling a breath he felt he'd been holding for 20 minutes. He raised his wrist to his mouth, speaking into the cufflink of his dress uniform. "Did you get it?" In his earpiece, Zoe's voice came through, clear and steady. She was sitting in a van 3 blocks away, hacking the local RF frequencies. "I got it," she said. "His phone tried to handshake with a server in the Caymans when you mentioned the leak. I have the IP address. We can track the money." "He killed the lieutenant, Zoe," Aiden whispered. "I know," she said. "I saw the feed. Aiden, we have to move. Now." "Why?" "Because while you were in there, facial recognition flagged me in the van. They're coming." Aiden hit the lobby button. "Get to the rendezvous. I'm coming out hot." He adjusted his uniform, checking the Sig Sauer tucked into the waistband at the small of his back. The Admiral was gone. The Night Fox's partner was back, and war had just been declared in the halls of the Pentagon, The Pentagon lobby was less a room and more a digestive tract for the military-industrial complex, marble floors, turnstiles, and the low hum of 1,000 careers being made or broken. Aidan Vance stepped into it, feeling the target painted on his back burning like a brand. He knew the rhythm of the security grid. He had helped design it. In 20 seconds, the silent alarm from Miller's office would cascade to the checkpoints. In 30, his face would flash on the biometric scanners with a code red flag. He didn't run. Predators don't run unless they're hunting. He walked with a terrifying, fluid casualness, his hand hovering near the small of his back, concealing the Sig Sauer beneath his dress jacket. "Admiral Vance?" A young MP, barely old enough to shave, stepped out of the glass booth. His hand rested uncertainly on his holster. "Sir, the system just flagged a containment breach in the E-ring. I need you to hold position." Aidan didn't stop. He closed the distance, invading the kid's personal space until he was a looming wall of ribbons and gold braid. "Son," Aidan said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated in the MP's chest. "I just triggered that breach. It's a localized counter-intrusion test for the new cyber warfare protocols. If you detain me, you're interrupting a live exercise authorized by the Joint Chiefs. Do you want to explain to the chairman why his grid failed?" The lie was absolute, delivered with the weight of 20 years of command. The MP hesitated, his eyes darting between the flashing console and the legendary Admiral. That second of doubt was all Aidan needed. "As you were," Aidan muttered, brushing past him. He hit the revolving doors and burst into the humid, suffocating heat of the DC afternoon. "Zoe, talk to me," he growled into his cufflink. "They burned the van." Zoe's voice came back, tight with adrenaline. "Facial rec picked me up at the vending machine. I'm in the south lot. Row G, blue utility truck. Potomac Power. Move." Aidan wove through the maze of parked cars, his ears picking up the distant wail of sirens closing in from the 14th Street Bridge. He spotted the truck, beat up, rusted wheel wells, engine idling with a rough cough. He ripped the passenger door open and slid in. Zoe was behind the wheel, a stolen hard hat pulled low over her eyes, a reflective vest covering her tactical gear. "Subtle," Aidan noted, slamming the door. "Survival usually is," she snapped, stomping the gas. The truck lurched forward, suspension groaning. They hit the exit just as two black government SUVs screeched across the main lanes, blocking toward the gate. Zoe didn't blink. She jerked the wheel, jumping the curb and crushing a row of pristine boxwoods, merging violently into the gridlock of I-395. "We have a problem," Zoe said, her eyes glued to the rearview mirror. That IP address Miller's phone pinged? It wasn't an offshore account. It was a local bounce. "Where?" "Bethesda," she said, the word heavy. "The Naval Annex. Building 7. Aidan went cold. Building 7 wasn't just a medical wing. It was the infectious disease containment unit, a black hole in the Navy's medical infrastructure. Restricted access, negative pressure rooms, Faraday cages. "It's perfect," Aidan whispered, the horror setting in. "He's keeping the Lazarus subjects in a biohazard ward. No visitors, no questions, total isolation." "If we go in there, there's no way out," Zoe warned, swerving around a taxi. "It's a fortress, Aidan, and your codes are dead." Aidan looked at the GPS tracker he had just ripped out of the dashboard, crushing it in his hand. He thought about the empty eyes of the men he had sent to die, men who might still be breathing in a glass cage. "I'm not using codes," Aidan said. He pulled out a burner phone, a relic from a past life. He dialed a number that hadn't been active in 5 years. It rang once, twice. "Auto body repair," a voice answered, rough, tired, sounding like it had gargled with gravel. I have a transmission problem, Aiden said. It's the Viking model. The line went dead silent. Then the voice shifted, losing the fatigue, sharpening into a razor. Viking is KIA. Viking is active, Aiden said. And he's with the Night Fox. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. You're playing with ghosts, boss. I need a breach. Bethesda. Building 7. 30 minutes. That's a hard target. Bring the wrecking crew, Barlow. Aiden hung up. Zoe stared at him, her knuckles white on the wheel. You called Barlow? She asked, a mix of disbelief and awe in her voice. Master Chief Barlow? The guy who leveled a city block in Fallujah to save a stray dog? He was acquitted, Aiden said, a grim smile touching his lips. And he owes me a kidney. The assault on Building 7 didn't look like a spy movie. It looked like a natural disaster. At 0845, a heavy-duty delivery truck, rigged with a reinforced steel bumper, smashed through the loading dock gate at 40 miles per hour. The collision sounded like a bomb going off, metal shrieking against metal, instantly triggering the facility's perimeter alarms. In the chaos, a side security door blew inward with a precise, controlled charge. Aiden and Zoe, now wearing stolen lab coats over their street clothes, slipped into the hallway through the smoke. The air was thick with dust and the blaring klaxons. Clear right! Moving! Master Chief Barlow emerged from the haze. He was a mountain of a man, beard greying but eyes sharp as flint, holding a suppressed carbine with casual ease. Flanking him were 4 men who looked like plumbers and electricians, but moved with the predatory grace of Tier 1 operators. Admiral, Barlow grunted, tossing Aiden a captured HK-416. You look like shit. Good to see you too, Chief, Aiden said, checking the chamber. Sub-basement, secure containment. We have 10 minutes before the National Guard locks this zip code down. Lead on. They moved as a phalanx, cutting through the sterile white corridors. When Obsidian contractors appeared at the stairwell, men in black tactical gear with no patches, the engagement was short, brutal, and loud. The confined space amplified the gunfire into a deafening roar. Aiden took point. The Admiral was gone. The operator was back. Slice the pie, check the corner, double tap. They breached the heavy steel doors of the sub-basement. The air here was freezing, smelling of ozone and high-grade antiseptic. Zoe, get to the terminal, Aiden shouted, scanning the room. It wasn't a prison, it was a zoo. 2 rows of glass-walled isolation cells lined the corridor. Inside each one lay a man, hooked up to IVs and monitors, staring vacantly at the ceiling. Aiden stopped at the first cell. He placed his hand on the glass. Jenkins, he breathed. Petty Officer Jenkins, washed out of BUD/S in 18. Official report said suicide. He moved to the next. Ramirez, KIA, Somalia, 20. Body never recovered. There were dozens of them. Men the Navy had thrown away, men Miller had stolen, wiped and repurposed as disposable assets. I'm in! Zoe yelled from the central console, her fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. I'm bypassing the local firewalls. I'm dumping everything. Personnel files, mission logs, Miller's slush fund, to the cloud. BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera. Once it's out, it's out. We've got company, Barlow roared from the entryway. The far elevator doors pinged open. Director Miller didn't step out. Instead, a silver canister skittered across the floor. Gas! Aiden screamed. Masks! Thick white smoke hissed out. CS gas mixed with a tranquilizer agent. Barlow's team dropped to a knee, laying down suppression fire as Obsidian operators in full MOPP gear poured out of the elevator. The lab turned into a war zone. Glass shattered. Monitors sparked and exploded. Zoe, time! Aiden shouted, firing blindly into the smoke. 90 seconds to upload, she coughed, pulling her shirt over her nose. "We don't have 90 seconds." Aiden looked at the glass cells. The men inside weren't moving. They were sitting ducks. He looked at the fire suppression pipes running along the ceiling. "Chief!" Aiden yelled. "Blow the halon system." "That'll suck the oxygen out, sir," Barlow shouted back, changing magazines. "It'll vent the gas too. Do it." Barlow didn't hesitate. He raised his grenade launcher and fired a 40mm round into the ceiling cluster. The explosion rocked the room. A massive whoosh of air rushed upward, pulling the smoke and gas into the vents. The sudden pressure drop popped the ears. Then a mechanical clack, clack, clack echoed down the line of cells. "What did you do?" Zoe asked, staring at her screen. "I didn't just vent the gas," Aiden said, standing up and dropping his empty mag. "I triggered the emergency failsafe, Protocol Alpha. In the event of a catastrophic system failure, all patient restraints are disengaged." In the glass rooms, the vacant eyes of the dead men blinked. Heads turned. IVs were ripped out of arms. The ghosts were waking up. The Obsidian team moved in with the precision of a scalpel, confident in their thermal optics and body armor. They were hunting fish in a barrel, but they hadn't accounted for the sharks Aiden had just released. The door to Jenkins's cell didn't just open, it was kicked off its hinges. Petty Officer Jenkins stumbled out, his hospital gown hanging loosely off a frame that was all sinew and scar tissue. He blinked, the chemical fog in his brain dissipating under the sudden, primal spike of adrenaline. He saw the black armor. He saw the rifle raised at Zoe. The programming Miller had beaten into him tried to classify the target. But the soldier underneath, the man who had carried a rucksack through the Hindu Kush, took over. Jenkins roared, a sound that wasn't human, and launched himself. He hit the lead Obsidian operator with the force of a hydraulic ram, driving his shoulder into the man's chest plate. The impact cracked the ceramic armor. Jenkins didn't stop. He ripped the helmet off the operator and used it as a bludgeon, the violence sudden and absolute. It was the spark that ignited the powder keg. Ramirez burst from his cell, tearing an IV pole from its stand and wielding it like a spear. Two more men, eyes wild with confusion and rage, flanked him. These were men who had been erased, drugged, and turned into hollow shells. But you couldn't strip the training, and you couldn't strip the brotherhood. The hallway dissolved into a chaotic, close-quarters brawl. It wasn't a firefight anymore. It was a prison riot of Tier 1 operators. Barlow's team held the perimeter, picking off the Obsidian shooters who tried to retreat, but the center of the room was a grinder. Aiden moved through it, his movements precise, calculated. He wasn't shooting, he was directing. "Ramirez, 3 o'clock!" Aiden barked, grabbing a confused soldier by the shoulder and spinning him away from incoming fire. "Weapon down! Secure the flank!" He shielded Zoe with his body as stray rounds sparked off the console. The progress bar hit 98%. "Aiden!" Zoe screamed over the din of shattering glass and shouting men. "It's done! The package is out!" "Get out with Barlow!" Aiden shouted back, shoving a fresh magazine into his sidearm. "Get these men to the extraction point. I'm not leaving without you. Go!" Aiden's eyes were locked on the far end of the hall. The elevator doors were trying to close, but a body was blocking the sensor. Inside, cowering behind two massive bodyguards, was Miller. Aiden stepped over a fallen contractor, his face a mask of cold fury. The two bodyguards stepped out to meet him. They were huge, built like linebackers, wielding collapsible batons. Aiden didn't slow down. He holstered his weapon. This needed to be personal. The first guard swung for his head. Aiden ducked, the steel baton whooshing through the air where his skull had been a fraction of a second before. He drove a palm strike into the guard's solar plexus, followed instantly by an elbow to the throat. The guard gagged and dropped. The second guard lunged. Aiden sidestepped, caught the man's wrist and used his own momentum to drive him face first into the reinforced glass of an empty cell. The glass spiderwebbed. The guard slid down, unconscious. Aiden stepped into the elevator vestibule. Miller was backed against the mirrored wall, his hands trembling as he fumbled for a compact pistol in his suit jacket. He looked small, pathetic, a bureaucrat who had mistaken paperwork for power. Aiden slapped the gun out of his hand with a contemptuous backhand. It skittered across the tile floor, useless. "It's over, Miller," Aiden said. His voice wasn't loud. It was terrifyingly calm, the eye of the storm. "You don't understand," Miller stammered, sweat pouring down his pale face, ruining his expensive silk tie. "The world is burning, Aiden. We need them. The wars of the future, they won't be fought by armies or flags. They'll be fought in the shadows, by ghosts who don't exist. I was building the ultimate defense. I was saving the country." "You were saving yourself," Aiden said, stepping closer until he could smell the fear on the older man. He reached out and grabbed Miller by the lapels, slamming him against the mirrored wall. The glass cracked. "You killed my men. You stole my life. You tried to execute the woman I love in a ditch." "I can fix this," Miller pleaded, his eyes darting around, looking for a way out, a deal to be made. "I have accounts, offshore, millions. I can give you anything. Command of the Joint Chiefs, full immunity. Just let me walk away. We can blame it on a rogue cell." Aiden stared at him. He saw the hollowness in Miller's eyes, the complete lack of morality. He realized then that Miller wasn't a monster. He was something worse. He was a calculator. "You're right," Aiden said softly. "There are no resurrections." Aiden didn't kill him. A bullet would be too quick. It would make Miller a martyr to the deep state. Instead, Aiden reached into Miller's breast pocket and pulled out his secure phone. He held it up, flipping the screen so Miller could see it. The camera light was blinking red. "The upload Zoe just finished?" Aiden said, his voice icy. It wasn't just the files. It was a live stream. To every news outlet, every embassy, every secure server in the Pentagon. The Joint Chiefs just watched you beg. The President just heard you offer a bribe. Miller's eyes went wide, the blood draining from his face until he looked like one of the corpses he had created. He slumped against the wall, his legs giving out. He wasn't destroyed by a bullet. He was destroyed by the truth. "You're dead, Aiden," Miller whispered, his voice cracking. "You're all dead." "Maybe," Aiden said, turning his back on him. "But we're free." He walked out of the elevator into the ruined hallway. The fighting had stopped. Barlow's men had subdued the remaining contractors. The Lazarus men, Ramirez, Jenkins, and the others, were huddled together, breathing hard, looking at their hands, at each other, slowly waking up from the nightmare. Zoe was waiting for him by the console. Her face was smeared with soot, her lab coat torn, a cut bleeding on her cheek. She looked like a wreck. She looked beautiful. She didn't say a word. She ran to him, colliding with his chest. Aiden wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in the crook of her neck, smelling the smoke, the cordite, and the faint, enduring scent of vanilla. "We did it," she whispered, her body trembling against his. "Yeah," Aiden said, looking at the wreckage of the Lazarus program and the men who were finally, truly alive. "We did." Sirens wailed outside. Real police, real FBI, maybe even the Marines. The cavalry was coming, and for the first time in 7 years, Aiden didn't care who they were. He reached up and unpinned the stars from his collar. They felt heavy, burdened with lies. He placed them on the reception desk, next to a shattered monitor. "Come on, Night Fox," he said, taking her hand, his grip iron tight. Let's go home. The hearings lasted for months. Director Miller's trial was the most watched event in global television history. The Lazarus Men were reintegrated, compensated, and given the hero's welcome they had been denied, though many disappeared quietly into new lives. Aidan Vance never stepped foot in the Pentagon again. He declined the book deals, the interviews, and the reinstatement offer from the president. Instead, if you go down to a quiet stretch of the Virginia coast, past the tourist traps, you might find a small boat repair shop at the end of a gravel road. There's a man there with greying hair who fixes diesel engines with the precision of a surgeon, and a woman with amber eyes who runs the books and keeps a loaded cig in the top drawer. They don't talk much about the past. They don't look over their shoulders. They just live. Sometimes, the hardest war to win is the one for your own peace. And sometimes, losing command of the room is the only way to find yourself. Enjoyed the story? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrillers.